calling to talk about Green Chimneys
Right.
and your music and whatnot. First of all, what are the challenges in playing pieces on the guitar that were created for the piano?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. Yeah. Well, I guess the challenge is to make it sound authentic on the guitar. And one of the things there's a few sort of responses to that question. Yeah, I had to find a way to kind of authenticate it on the guitar, which specifically for me involved things like changing keys, which of course some people think is sacrilegious. What the composer, where the composer, I think that's a little taken as a little purist. For example, a piece like um, Around Midnight was composed in the key of E flat minor, which is difficult on the not difficult, but it doesn't give you a lot on the guitar in terms of the guitar voices. If you move it up one fret or half a step, you get into E minor, which is, of course, basically the key the guitar is in, and you get a lot of open strings, a lot of very interesting dissonances and open voicings that you wouldn't normally you wouldn't get in E flat minor. So it starts to really sound like a guitar piece then. It can sound a lot more beautiful, actually. There's a lot of stuff you can do which is not available in E flat minor. So that's the key. In fact, this is a slightly weird one on Around Midnight. What I did was to play it as if the guitar was in the position of E minor, the open E minor. But in fact, I detuned the whole guitar a half step. So in fact, it's authentically in E flat minor, but made available on the guitar with the open strings. But
Hmm.
I don't know if you can follow that, but
Yeah, it's almost like you're
that's
tricking
the
yourself.
original key, and I wanted to have these the dissonant voicings available to me, but that meant to achieve that, played it as if in E minor, but in fact with the guitar tuned down. And then things like that. I would change, keys slightly, find way to, play the heads or the actual compositions with open strings, slide, slurs, harmonic, hammers, to make it sort of sound distinctive rather than just playing everything just sort of fretted and just like I'm just playing the tune without really thinking about it in terms of the guitar itself.
Right.
So I was pretty specific about that.
Although just in
Uh,
switching from the main instrument from a piano to a guitar, you are obviously putting your own spin on everything.
yeah.
Was there any people who, were nervous about the idea of, just even doing that, just taking away the piano as the
No, to me,
backbone?
it was the first consideration is right. Okay, there's, no piano on this record. I mean, the most obvious move to me because it's my record, Andy Summers.
Right.
It's like, okay, I'm not putting any piano on this record because what's the point? For me, I mean, there's organ on it, but it kind of moves away. It's distinct enough and unmonk-like enough that it was okay as a texture. But I mean, why would you want to use piano on a record of Thelonious Monk record unless you were just another pianist doing Monk?
Right.
For me, I wanted to make it very fresh and have it sound as if the Monk sound as far as I could achieve it in a way that it hadn't been heard before. But I mean, all these things were in my head, and I was thinking about them. For instance, like I tried to do a sort of left-handed piano on Bemshire Swing with the dobro because it kind of got more like a piano sound, and try and like think about Monk's possible sort of off-the-wall approaches to playing solos on some of the solo aspects. So I mean, it's a sort of there's to a degree you're self-conscious about it. I'm thinking about Monk. I've got it in my head. I want to be respectful and pay homage, but at the same time you want to have your own voice in there. So it's a lot of things, and some of it's just playing it, thinking back and wondering if you've got it or not, and maybe not listening to it for a while, and then come back and listen to what you did and seeing if it sounds authentic. A lot of things. So I mean, doing a record like this is a real challenge in a way. In some ways, harder than just doing your own stuff, because a lot of people have done Monk, and you're trying to present it differently and have it come off as not just a failed attempt, but to be really to have spirit. But it's easier and more difficult both at the same time. Yeah.
And it sounds like with this, more than traditional albums, a lot of planning had to go into it before you even began the recording process. Mapping out.
Well, there was a lot of preparation in terms of internalizing the Monk music or the Monk repertoire. There were certain things I did. You can prepare, but of course, you're playing jazz, so I think it's more like internal preparation, and then you've got to try and be spontaneous, but hopefully out of all that internal preparation, the right thing's going to emerge. But, all right, well, on that, I stopped listening to anything else for a couple of months before I made this record. I only listened to Monk. Stopped listening to any other kind of music. I'd also gone through the whole repertoire, which is about 90 pieces, and, sort of sorted them into categories, decided which ones had been played too much. There's some like undiscovered gems I could bring out. Played most of them on the guitar. I worked right the way through it, and so I was pretty much into it by the time we got around to recording. I was very familiar with it, and I sort of saturated with it. I felt that I could be in the right place to play it.
Was it then difficult getting out of that mindset once you had finished the project?
No, it was fine. I mean, I'm not totally out of it, really, because I'm out now playing it.
Right.
This is what I'm playing, because, the record's out, and so to, back up the whole event, I go out, and this is what I don't only play this, I play my own older material as well, but I'm currently playing a lot of the pieces off the album. Yeah, for a long time, because, it took me a while to put this whole record together. It was a sort of rigorous mental discipline where I just stayed with the program. And, in some ways, at the end of all that, once the record was done, it was nice to let go of it a bit and sort of return to some of the earlier stuff I was playing. It all seemed very easy.
Now, one of the first things you notice when comparing Monk's recordings to yours is the difference in the quality of sound.
Yeah.
Quite obviously because of you had much different recording materials available to you than he did.
Yeah.
Was there ever any concern about making the songs too clean or too crisp?
Well, it's a good thought. No, I mean, yeah, I understand who you're saying, but no, I mean, I just was thinking, I guess the way I almost sort of visualized it was that everything's just going to sound much clearer and fresh because of the what we can bring to recordings now, the actual recordings quality. Now, I saw that as a plus, actually.
So it's kind of like when you pick up an older vinyl album and you dream of, geez, if only he had the kind of recording equipment I have access to, how much better we could have heard it.
And also I like recordings to be, it's always something I have to go through with every engineer, because engineers will tend to separate everything out and make them very clean, because that's what they do, and I always try and keep things a little rough, a little murky sounding, punchier. I don't like things to be too audiophile, as it were, because I think it tends to take away from the richness of the music sometimes. It's hard thing to talk about. It's because that's when you're in the mixing mode. And in fact, I mixed this record twice. First time, we were pretty exhausted, and we mixed the record. It was just before Christmas. We both went off for a couple of weeks. I came back, and I knew that they could be better. I think we both returned and felt in the same place. We virtually remixed the whole album, because it was like we had a better take on it, and we were fresher, and the second time we got it right, I think. It definitely came out a lot stronger.
And then not only with this album, but with your other work, has that been a struggle trying to maintain the warmth to the sound in and amongst all this technology and advances?
Yeah, I mean, it's always something that I have to deal with, like telling you, it's not too clean, no, it's too clean, it's too much reverb, everything sounds too separated, make it sound more like a band. So it's always, a personal aesthetic, and we go on with digital technology. I have to always kind of fight to keep it more analog sounding. But I work with a brilliant engineer who's very hip to all this stuff, and it was interesting doing this one because it was the first time in my life we recorded straight to disc with a new system, the radar system. But it sounds fantastic, and it's so easy to use now. it gives you so much creative edge as you're going along.
So it'll probably be the method you use to record in the future?
Oh, I think so, yeah. I can't, and it's so fast. It's like waiting for tape spools to, wind back now. It's just like, oh my God. Can't be bothered. It's like with the radar system, you just press the button, you're straight back to where you were.
Right,
Saves the real time saver, but it sounds great too. No, I mean, we're sort of there. To me, it was like this year, and this year's recording, it's like everything had arrived. And I think it's gone up, it's gotten better since I know that radar system went up to 24-bit since I used it.
Now, earlier you brought up the tune Round Midnight.
Yeah.
And I was curious why that as the only song with vocals and why Sting doing the vocals.
Well, I don't know if there is another Monk song. There may be. I think somebody wrote something to Ruby. There may be more, but Round Midnight is obviously the standout. It's a great classic that sort of transcended Monk's own verve. Is that the word?
Yeah.
And, why have Sting think? Well, there's the obvious reasons that everyone liked to see him and I connected on something. It's nice for both of us to do that. But also, I think he does sing this, that sort of husky, non-vibrato quality he's got to his singing. I thought it was perfect for this. So, it's just a nice thing that everybody would like. But the truth is, he can sing this stuff really well.
Yes.
So it wasn't difficult to put together. I called him and asked him if he was interested in doing it. He was very responsive. So that was sort of it. It was me then to construct the backing track so that he could put the vocal on. That's what I did, and then I flew to Italy to where he was living to get him on it. It was a good experience.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
And just a few weeks ago, I interviewed Bill Evans, who...
Bill Evans is a saxophone player?
Yes. And
great guy.
He said to say hello, by the way.
Oh, well, that's great. Yeah.
And he said, because I asked him about you, and he said that you are a musician with vision, that you look at your study of the guitar as a lifelong learning process. Now, the question I have is, how does learning via jazz differ from learning via rock?
How does it differ? Boy, let me see. How do you answer that question? Well, I mean, you're specifically learning different things. I mean, you're learning a different rhythmic feel. I mean, the feel of a jazz solo is very different than a rock solo. I mean, let's see how much of this I articulate. I mean, when you play rock solos, the music is much more in strict. You play in eighth notes that are much stricter and on the beat than in jazz. Jazz is much more away from the beat. It's a lot sexier, and the accents come in different places. Whereas rock is like, do 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 do.
Right.
It's more like that. Jazz is with it's a very different feel, but it's the emphasis of the accents. Rock compared to jazz improvisation, and this is a real generalization, it's a lot stiffer. Jazz is much looser and sexier, and it comes from a different. But in musical terms, it's the placement of the accents. I mean, these are generalizations.
Right.
But that's what you would be working on, and you would take a long time to really get the feel of where a solo goes. But then it's much deeper than that, even, because I mean, you're talking about a major area here. Like how do you construct a great solo? I mean, because in jazz it should be an unfolding. It should be like what's the right word? A narrative. It should be an unfolding of a series of ideas that you like goes on a little journey and you go somewhere. And rock can be like that, but less so in rock. But in a jazz solo, you would tend to build it, and you build on the ideas that went before. You play motifs, play inside and outside of the harmony. You use quotes. There's many. It's very rich and deep. It's life. Rock solos tend to be in the middle of a song where someone's singing, and
yeah, more abrasive.
Oh yeah, and obviously much more abrasive. It's a whole different field. But I mean, it's learning. In jazz, you're going to play jazz on a guitar, then you've got to really study harmony in depth. I mean, it's a lifetime study. You never finish. You never fully master. You master it, but you never master it really. You never get all of it. No matter how many years you put in. Rock is obviously a lot simpler harmonically. You don't need quite the depth of harmony at all. I think the more personally, I think the more you know, the more you bring to any field, and then you shape it. I mean, certainly in the police, I was very loaded with, jazz and classical studies, but I was playing rock, but I was able to open up the sort of rock parameters by bringing these other elements in. Just made it interesting for people, not esoteric.
Oh, no.
So because the main thing is the rhythm was, the drums were still there playing in a rock style, and I was able to float all these different things in and out that weren't in a normal, what was sort of a conventional rock style at the time. I think jazz, I hate to make these comparisons because they're sort of odious. I think it's the deepest study, and it is more difficult to play it really well at the right depth or the right level. You've got to put in a great deal of time. It's a deep intellectual lifetime study. The trouble with rock for me is that I get bored with it. I get bored with the rhythms, particularly. The drumming gets boring for me because it's not loose enough. I find it very wooden and stiff compared to jazz.
Yeah, jazz has a more organic feel.
Yeah, much more organic. It's looser. It's much more with the body. I find it a lot sexier. Rock is very stiff to me. It's kind of continual 8 forward motion.
Right. Last fall I interviewed a drummer by the name of Billy Cobham.
Yeah.
And he described his playing in jazz and drumming as he always thinks of it as he's writing a letter to someone.
Yeah.
And so that seems to be what you were talking about. How
it is. It's a narrative. It has to come from the right place. And I go out now and I play. I usually play with a trio, but I stand there for a couple of hours on stage, and I basically I play these beautiful tunes, and then I improvise. Basically, improvisation is like sort of on-the-spot composition, but playing jazz like that and trying to play deep, it's a real mirror of where you are at the time. Your head, your physicality, the room, how you feel about your life, and it really mirrors all these things. And that's what I love about it. There's a truth to it that when you really just stand there and you're just trying to play naked in the space, then it's like you're really attaching to a sort of a life process.
Yeah.
It's hard stuff to talk about,
right.
Because you're in kind of it sounds so mystical, but which is what it is in a way. I mean, words cannot kind of describe it, except when it's happening for, at the right level, you connect to something. It'll get a bit religious, but it is sort of a higher power or something. But you do get sort of connected in a way that is deep and hard to talk about, but it's very satisfying. You connect with a source. It doesn't happen every time, but in the really great moments, that's when it's happening like that. It's a wonderful thing.
And also, I think for the listener too, especially at a live performance,
Yeah, people know. I think particularly the audiences in this country, which are very musical, people connect with it. They know when you're there. It's wonderful.
And then, not to keep you much longer, but just one other question. Another thing that Bill Evans said, and which a lot of people have said, is that you have one of the most distinctive guitar sounds in music. Is this ever a burden? Do you ever find yourself unconsciously...
That's a good question, yeah, because, and probably a lot of people mean the police by that. Well, it's very nice, but you don't even want to get stuck with that, really. You want to be able to keep moving on as much as you can, but I don't know, I think you just go on and you keep doing what you're doing. You can sort of reshape it. But I think it can be a burden if people mean, well, why don't you just play just like you did in the police? Well, yeah, that was a long time ago now. I did that. I've gone to somewhere else with it, which I think, for me, right now is a lot more interesting. But,
well, yeah.
I hope that, whatever it is, it's your own touch and it comes out anyway. I mean, I think I still got that.